Definitely. In fact, I think probably the first developments we do will be grid connected. So we expect that that'll be the first way we'll be able to introduce this. We can still put solar in the community. We can still have vertical farming containers in the community and be able to replicate some of those urban or suburban or rural off-grid community concepts within a grid connected community.
Good day, everybody. My name is Laura Blees, founder of Seeds for Eagle Communities, and I wanted to welcome you to our podcast, Roots to Roofs. We'll maybe kick it off by introducing our special guest, Ed Peterson. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, I'm Ed Peterson. I'm the founder of the Tiny Town Association, and we're a not-for-profit, and we were formed back in 2017 with the intention of, actually it all started because I wanted to get my kids out of the house and they couldn't afford anywhere to move. So the thought was, I looked around at the time and I realized that, the current forms of housing were really expensive, and what we needed something that was smaller and affordable. That's where the tiny homes concept came into the model, and then it grew into being a tiny town concept, bunch of tiny homes of people with the same intentions living together in a community. So that's what we're working on today.
I love how, Ed, this started at a very real place with you and your family and recognizing that need, but then you sort of took that idea and saw how others have a similar need and created an organization around that. In terms of like the organization and sort of the longer term visions and goals for the future, could you talk a little bit more about what you do and how that all works?
It started, looking to find property that we could purchase and then develop into a tiny home community. And after trying that for a few years, of course, I'd see a great piece of property. I'd think, great, we could build this into a community. It was for sale. I'd find it on Realtor. We put together some ideas, approached the municipality, and usually around that time, the property would get sold. And so we were back to square one all over again, looking for another property, because we didn't want to just rush out and purchase this piece of property with the assumption that we'd be able to develop into a community. We wanted to get the municipality and the local city or town on board before we went ahead and did that. And that I found out over the years has been quite a challenge, because this is something new and something that the municipalities and cities and towns tend to view as, potentially another campground or mobile home park that would become potentially pleasant to live in or have in the community. So, it's been a real challenge to be able to present these tiny home communities as not something to be feared as unusual, but rather to be seen as the same as any other community, but just made up of very small groups. And we've grown our model from just being small homes to being also a community, where we wanted to have a centralized community center, and also have a lot of things to make the community sustainable on its own. So the concept has grown, and what we did is we've now approached different municipalities. Well, actually, we reached out to every municipality across Ontario and presented our concept and said, who was interested in us working together with us to develop something like this locally. And so we've gone from trying to find a piece of property and then convince a municipality to support it, to rather looking for a municipality that would support it. And then, and then once we have that, then look for land and work through the process.
Wow, it's quite the journey. Something kind of sparked me there when you talked about that research and outreach you did with Ontario municipalities around sort of seeing who's interested, who maybe have land available. Are you able to share a little bit more about that work? I know from a personal note, as we get approached at Seeds for Eco Communities from Ontario communities, looking for some information around what is available, where there may be appetite. I've actually had the opportunity to share that link with quite a few people. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because it's great work and a really valuable resource.
Yes. Well, we reached out to all municipalities across Ontario. So that's 440 of them. And from that, we actually got, I think, 131 responses. So 131 municipalities responded back to us with some interest. They had, I think, 78 Zoom meetings that year with them. And that was then whittled down to actually 24 municipalities that said, yes, we have land. We're interested in supporting this form of housing, this form of community. And so let's discuss from there. So, that was our starting point. So after that was about a year and a half process to whittle it down. But that gave us the starting point where we could begin working with municipalities to say, okay, well, here's the concept. Now we have to look at what's involved in taking that piece of it to the point where we could develop that.
That sounds like a lot of meetings and outreach, but it's so amazing that the Tiny Town Association has done this work, because for a lot of people who are trying to get established in their area, it seems sometimes an sort of overwhelming amount of work to work through all the different levels of government and see what's available. So what a great project that was. I'm wondering a little bit more about affordable housing. So I know we all see in the newspaper, online, the need for affordable housing, whether it's kind of in our local community, across Canada, and even internationally. This seems to be definitely a global issue. So I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit around, why maybe this time be the right time for that sort of smaller footprint living to move forward. Like, what are some of those drivers aside from what we're kind of hearing in the newspaper there?
I mean, housing has kind of grown. Housing has mostly been driven by developers. Okay, so they'll purchase a piece of property, they'll come up with a plan on how they'd like to build and develop on it. They'll present it to the municipality and then or the town, get approvals for it. So because it's developer driven, a developer is really in the business of making money. That's what they do, and to support. I mean, whether it's a smaller family-run operation or whether it's a corporation with shareholders. I mean, they're in the business of making money for their shareholders. So that then suggests that the type of housing they build, they need to maximize their return on the investment that they're building with for their investors. So when you build a house, your most expensive rooms are your washrooms and your kitchen, because the rest of the rooms in your house are essentially empty shells. I mean, they're just air that's been enclosed by walls. So, I mean, that's very inexpensive to build compared to your kitchen and your washrooms. So the more of those rooms you can put into a house and then charge more as the size of your house increases, it becomes more profitable for. So the challenge with a tiny home or small modular home is that it's primarily a bedroom, a washroom, and then a living space. So at least 50% of that home is made up of your more expensive rooms, and 50% is your less expensive rooms. Versus, let's say, a traditional house that would have, a kitchen, a couple of bathrooms, a living room, possibly indoor dining room, a number of bedrooms, halls. All those things are very, your kitchen and your bathroom might only turn out to be 1/5 of the house. So, each bedroom you can add on, and let's say the bedroom allows you to sell the house for an extra $10,000 or $20,000, the more bedrooms you can fit in and sell your house for, the more profit you're going to make. So the challenge with going small is, how do you create something that's affordable and also have it acceptable? We did a study, well, I did this study, but at the same time, or maybe just before, we reached out to municipalities as far as what the housing needs were across Canada. And our biggest, the biggest demographic of housing need, the most units we needed was for 1 and 2 bedroom, 1 and 2 person family units, if you will. And the reason why that's the biggest need, because if you take that back to the cost to build a house, right? If you're only building a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment, you're going to make less on that than if you're going to build for the family or 3 or 4 bedroom home. So developers don't tend to focus on that, which means that's where we have the biggest shortage. So that's where the tiny home or small modular housing, we use that now, came into play, because it filled that need, which turned out to be like 67% of the housing need. So over half of the housing need is for that size of home. And then we started to think about how that, really played into how it could support addressing the housing crisis. And although, 1-bedroom home or 1 or 2 person household doesn't address the whole need of families, etc., by creating those, we now also create an opportunity for seniors and empty nesters who are living in family homes because they can't downsize into anything else right now. We potentially give them an avenue to move out of their family home and free up that family home then for a family. So even though, we're only looking at building for 1 and 2 person households, we still address the need across the whole housing continuum.
Yeah, it's interesting too around sort of the developers and the trends, and I take your point around sort of the focus is generally around profit driven priorities. But I am curious, in your work that you've done and kind of working with developers, are you seeing a little bit more appetite for that sort of community like framework or solution when they are putting builds together? Or do you find that the developer is still just really focused on the bottom line?
Well, honestly, I mean, I've heard some recently more interest in that in the affordable housing area. I've yet to actually see it come into practice, so I'm hopeful that it will, it being kind of maybe a newer trend. So yeah, that's really all I can comment on. I've seen interest. I'm hoping I'm going to see actual, development happening. Or what we're trying to do is even say, well, if you're building a large community, let's see if we can integrate a small section that is, these smaller footprint housing, and try and create that affordable housing. The last challenge with that, however, is, it's not just the size of the house that determines the value of the house when it's on the market, right? Because really, in our housing market economy, the value of the house is how much somebody's willing to pay to get into it. I saw, a couple of years ago an ad, somebody selling a tiny home-sized home in Toronto for $1 million. So, that's just really emphasized this point, is that it's not the size of the house that determines the value. It's how much somebody's going to pay for that space. And that's typically a function of where that space is located.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would say kind of similar observations from my interaction and knowledge with the developers. Like there's obviously a focus around sort of the bottom line of the dollar, but I am starting to see a little bit more around interest and proposals in the space of looking a little bit further. So I'm also optimistically looking forward to the future on that one. So aside from the sort of affordability piece, though, just to be the devil's advocate, if I was a person looking at this type of lifestyle and maybe I don't need to move forward to this lifestyle for affordability reasons, like what are the other benefits? Why would I want to live in a community of smaller sized dwellings, for example?
I get that often, is kind of, why would people want to live here? Um, and, as I have in the picture behind me, you know, the idea is that people are living in smaller spaces, and even the spaces between the homes are not huge. Actually, it's funny because they're not really, our plans aren't that they're really, really small, even the spaces between homes, especially if we compare it to newer neighborhoods now, it's about the similar size. But really what the focus is not so much on your personal space, but on that shared space. As you can see behind me, which way to move here. There you go. The larger space there, the homes are all around the outside, and the larger space in the center is that community space. Now, for this picture, it's just shown as grass, but we see it as being places where people can grow gardens and get together and have some outdoor seating, and you can really get together with your neighbors. And I think that's something that this type of living will help reintroduce, if you will, is the concept of community. So I think that's one of the big things is what we want to do is help build that sense of community. And by encouraging not any one age group within the community, it's not planned to be a seniors community. It's not planned to be a starter community, but rather a all age, all income community, so that it will integrate people who will be living and working together. And hopefully the thought is that, older people will be able to share some of their life experiences with younger people. Younger people will be able to maybe provide some of the assistance that older people may require. But the idea is really to develop that community concept, people living not in the same house, obviously, but together. So we started with a off-grid model for our community, and really plan to include solar, small wind generation, off-grid, like communal waste and water systems. All those are available now, and we would like to integrate them all into these communities if they are more of a rural or a suburban even community. But there's that opens up a whole new round of challenges, because really in Ontario we don't have there's not a lot of experience, I'd have to say, probably, in communal systems at the municipal levels. So there's a lot of caution there. And so I think as hopefully these communities evolve and there's more opportunity for the municipalities and even the municipal government to see this model growing, then there will be more support, and more of those off-grid services can be utilized.
Yeah, I definitely see that in sort of the policy world that I work on with my other hats around, just trying to sort of move populations and development towards the urban center. So I'm curious, and we also have sort of the gold star is off grid too, but we have been thinking more in the last few years around, can this model also be applied to be like somewhat on grid or sort of a partially off grid? Is that something that you envision for your pocket neighborhoods and some of the concepts that you have for your community, that it could possibly be tied to the grid where maybe a municipality or an area hasn't moved towards that legal framework yet to allow fully off grid? Is that an option?
Definitely. In fact, I think probably the first developments we do will be grid connected. And again, that's just because a grid connected community is the closest that municipality is familiar with. So we expect that'll be the first way we'll be able to introduce this. But it doesn't mean that we can't also, and what we're hoping to do is also include some of those sustainable features, because we can still put solar in the community. We can still have vertical farming containers in the community and be able to replicate some of those, more urban or suburban or rural off-grid community concepts within a grid connected community.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to be sort of flexible as we move through some of those policy hurdles. And I know we've talked a little bit about that just in general around some of the limitations with different frameworks, whether it be sort of provincially or locally. Um, but I guess I'm just wondering, if there's a government or an individual who's out there sort of listening online to this podcast, like what is it that they can do to help sort of advocate towards that movement?
Yes, I think, there's a really great model community in Fredericton, New Brunswick. So the 12 Neighbors has built a 99 tiny home community that is within the town of Fredericton. So, which is really awesome. And, they worked with the town to develop it. And I was talking to the founder, and it was quite a challenge to begin. And they had a lot of things they had to overcome as far as zoning and planning went. But working with the city, they were able to overcome all those. And they created a really unique, well, like a unique zoning. So rather than having to create bylaws, zoning bylaws for each part of the change they needed, they used a special designation for the development, and then they had a development agreement attached to that. So the development agreement is how they laid out all the components within that zone, and they were able to build it that way. And what's great is that didn't set a precedent. It overcame that concern that, oh, if we allow one tiny home community here, they're going to start springing up everywhere and we'll be out of control. So this model was great, though, because it allowed them to develop the one. And now it's, there is nothing, no zoning amendments that could be used to, or could have somebody say, well, I want to do the same thing here and try and push it through. That's, the pushing it through method is kind of the way things go now. So what I liked about what they did in Fredericton is, 12 Neighbors worked with the municipality and developed um, this framework to do the building. So, if somebody was listening, I would say that that model could be replicated anywhere. And it's a great way to allow a development to be tested and tried, and in an area without the fear of having them run amok, or people are running around everywhere and saying, I want one of these, I want one of these.
Like going into safety mode.
Yes, yes.
Nice.
But still allow it to happen, because I think that's the key, right? Is finding a way to allow the development to happen so that you can monitor it, see what you like about it, and then take that as the first step to do it again.
It's so interesting that you talk about the special designation policy, because through the work that we've done at Seeds for Eco Communities and kind of looking through different jurisdictions and the many, many layers and all the different legislation and rules that fall within that, it can be sometimes almost overwhelming, and it's probably hard even for the local area to figure out all the places. So we've actually come to a similar conclusion at Seeds for Eco Communities around encouraging and advocating for that special designated area. Like you say, it can still be demonstrated and done in a legal fashion, but it can then sort of draw a line around the map and create a zone. Obviously, all the other laws are going to get taken into consideration, but it allows to just sort of really flesh out in one area how it works. And then I do think as well, some of our thinking on the special zones is, once a municipality does establish that, it could then be adopted by other municipalities without sort of changing all the broad rules. So there's not, this huge influx immediately, but should another municipality or that same municipality want to have a second community, they have something to point to. I would say from my experience on the building code, in Ontario, like often when there's something new and innovative, once one municipality comes through and they do it in law and they test it out, often others snatch it up, because there are many municipalities, as you would have learned from your extensive research, who are really interested in doing this, but maybe a little shy to take that first step, right? So that was really interesting that that's what's worked well. And do you happen to know if there's like a website available that we could share from this community?
Yeah, so it's 12neighbors.org maybe.
Do you have more, Laura, or you look, or he's probably looking to go here in a little bit? I see that.
Yeah, just almost finished off here, but wanted to give a plug to the Tiny House Show, because that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Ed, and just a great place to go and walk around some tiny homes, check out some workshops, and just meet those, like-minded people, because there's a lot of people in this space, and we're there with you, Ed. We're not giving up until, things move forward with communities, and from there it can just blossom. We can help others locally and around the world. So just to close off, are there any inspiring words you want to leave us with, Ed?
Just really that we're still working to build communities. I have, at the last tiny home show, a number of people stopped by my booth and said, they've been following us for years. They're really looking forward to, that first community development, and I as well. I really think we're close to it now. So, it's really just follow us on social or sign up for our newsletter on our website, and that's the best way to keep updated on our progress. And, as soon as we have something available, I'm sure there'll be lots of people that'll want to become involved more or live in the community. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And just reflecting on my cup here for us, Ed, I think it will feel like a miracle when we get to that point. So my cup here says, miracles happen.
Awesome. Love that.
And this is actually from Finhorn Eco Village in North Scotland. One of the homes there makes their own pottery. So they're doing it, and we can do it here, and we'll get there. So just really wanted to thank you, Ed, for joining us today on Roots to Roof. It's great always chatting with you and hearing about some of the same like-minded initiatives and projects you have underway, and also encourage our viewers to check out our website. Please hop on our social channels, have a look at the products, comment, let us know what you like, what else you'd like to see, and we'd be happy to roll that out for you. And if you're interested in supporting us, please be a Patron member. Thanks, everyone.